What's up guys, and welcome to my third ever review of the Porsche 992 generation of 911. The first two I reviewed were the 911T and then the GT3. Today we are in a 2022 model year 911 Carrera S, and the owner Suki has done a few mods to make this car an absolute animal in terms of straight line performance. So the S model has a 3-liter turbocharged flat 6 engine that was rated for 443 horsepower, 390 pound-feet of torque when stock, but Suki has added a Klein exhaust with Klein Sport Cats and an M Engineering Stage 2 tune. He estimates this is now pushing out close to 600 horsepower, so an increase of roughly 150 horsepower. Other mods include this numeric short shift kit with a sport shifter knob and some GT3 side skirts. So a small number of mods, but game-changing mods, improving the shift feel of the 7-speed transmission and increasing the horsepower by something like 30%. So this car does weigh around 3,400 pounds, and it's got McPherson strut front suspension, unlike the double wishbones of the GT3 model. And Suki mentioned that this car, when brand new, was $136,000. Of course, that was back in 2022. A similarly spec'd one today in 2024, at least $150,000. Of that $136K MSRP, roughly 20 was the options, but the options that he chose are quite tasteful in my opinion. We've got just the standard Sport-Tech seats, which I actually really like. It's a nice textured material, stitched leather across the dash, and the material along this section actually looks and feels kind of similar to the cloth on the seats. Not a big fan of the piano black along the center console, but other than that, everything just looks and feels so nice. I love the 992 steering wheel. Something about these kind of floating buttons just really gets me. I love that design. And one important thing before we get going here, this car does not have rear axle steering. And in terms of modes, we'll put this into Sport Plus, which gives us the open exhaust valve, the sharpest throttle response, and the PASM adaptive damper set to Sport. We're just on the stock Spider wheels with Pirelli P0 tires. Nothing too aggressive from the outside. By the way, this color is called Gentian Blue, and it is so gorgeous. It's subtle, but so nice. Oh my. This thing's a rocket ship. The mid-range torque is outstanding. 50% throttle application, little straight line pull was all I needed to know this is not making stock power. Throttle response is quite sensitive. With this exhaust and the valve fully open, there is a little bit of droniness inside the cabin at lower RPM. A little bit of a grind going into third gear, but oh my god, that straight line performance. It puts the GT3 to shame in that department. Brakes feel good, nice solid pedal, just like all 911s. Oh, that is hilarious. 3,400 pound car with 600 horsepower. I believe it. That 600 horsepower estimate sounds right to me. The butt dyno does not disagree. Now, one thing I'm noticing though that I'm not a big fan of is this steering. It's super precise, super sharp. You can place the front end with pinpoint accuracy, but there's virtually no feedback coming through the wheel. Not as good as the GT3 steering for sure. Not that the GT3 even has amazing steering. Got the auto rev match on, starting first gear, 2,000 RPM. Wow. That's something I've never experienced in a 911, in the sense that it's not just the power, but the minimal turbo lag. I would say the 997 GT2 probably has similar straight line performance, but in that car, you really have to wait for those turbos to spool up. In this car, there's only maybe a 1-second delay, and then the thing just rockets you forward. Wow. The gearing is really quite long, even with this 7-speed gearbox, you would think the ratios would be a little bit shorter. What in the world? This car is ridiculous. It's still a very sharp handling sports car. After all, it is a 911, but it does feel quite big. It's very wide. It doesn't feel like the old 997 in terms of size. Oh my God. I'm speechless. This straight line performance is not what I expected. There's pros and cons to turbocharging, right? The 911 Carrera and Carrera S models had been naturally aspirated for the longest time. With the 991.2 generation and now the 992.1, they moved to downsized displacement plus turbocharging for the Carrera and Carrera S and Carrera T and GTS. Yeah, there are just so many trim levels of 911, but point being is that you definitely do lose a couple of things from the naturally aspirated engines. The super sharp throttle response at all RPMs, and of course the lack of turbo lag. There is turbo lag with this engine. Below around 3 grand, if you put your foot down, you do have to wait for a bit. I would argue the sound isn't as good either. That flat 6 howl is a bit muffled by the turbocharger. So those are the cons. But the tunability of this engine, try taking a 991.1 Carrera S and tuning it to 600 horsepower. You'd have to add forced induction and all the supporting mods that go along with it. This car, you just throw an exhaust, high flow cats, and a tune, and you're at 600 horsepower. And if that's what you like, if you like straight line performance, this is gonna give you plenty of that. I'm almost scared to put my right foot down because of how much performance there is. And this is a rear-wheel drive car. Rear engine though, so there is plenty of traction, but still got to be careful with that much power being forced through those rear tires. Also, this numeric shifter feels really good. It feels like it should be the OEM shifter. It's not super high effort. It doesn't add a lot of noise either. It just makes the shift quality really nice and smooth and slick. But if I'm being totally honest, there are some things I really don't like about this car. Number one, again, being the steering. The engine also doesn't sound great. Let me give you the full experience here. First gear. I mean, it doesn't sound bad either, but it's a bit monotone across the rev range. It doesn't build in pitch in the same way that the old naturally aspirated engines, or the GT3 for that matter, do. Obviously, we shouldn't really compare it to the GT3, given that's a very, very special engine. But is the lack in character and feedback worth the incredible increase in performance and the fact that we get modern tech and an absolutely outstanding interior? You have to be the judge for yourself on that one. For me, I like the rawness of the older cars, but I will definitely recognize just how absolutely insane this level of performance is. And the fact that you no longer have to go 911 Turbo or GT3 or GT2 in order to get this much performance. Just get a normal Carrera or Carrera S and throw some mods on it in a tune, and you have an absolute rocket ship that you can drive every single day. So big shout out to Suki, the owner. Let me know what you think of the 992 Carrera S. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.